that, as an executive coach, I have access to celebrities and athletes and politicians and successful people. But I didn't want anybody in the world who isn't necessarily or doesn't have a life path that ends up in that level of success. I wanted them to have access to the same information completely for free. Right. So that's why, it's called equal chance to be unequal, as I'm giving them effectively the same information, right? That equal chance. But then what I want them to become is unequal or more authentic in whatever way they desire to be. And so giving them the same information, resources, tools, all of that to be able to be the most authentic and happy and joy-filled versions of themselves.
Talking with the experts.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. My name's Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com, and Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners, and you can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. And today it's my very great pleasure to welcome Michael Seaver to the show. Michael is an award-winning executive coach, leadership consultant, keynote speaker, and author. He's on a mission to unlock human potential to help people uncover and live their purpose and live a more meaningful and authentic life. His unique methodology has revolutionized how leaders can live authentically and how organizations engage employees. He offers no-nonsense strategies to help people find confidence in their life's narrative, commonalities across generations working today, and ways to communicate with emotional intelligence. Welcome, Michael, and thank you so much for joining me today.
You are welcome, and thank you, Rose, for your time. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about what you do and who you serve.
Yeah, so the executive coach, leadership consultant, speaker, author. I've been doing this for 10 years formally in my business. And the last couple of years have been really focused in on finance and accounting professionals. So helping accounting firms with organizational development and change management, and then helping executives directly, more so one-to-one coaching through mainly a 6-month program. But that really is designed to help them through the process of self-discovery or to get to the point of communicating more effectively or to drive levels of engagement with their teams. And the thing that has really shifted and transitioned for me in the last probably year is that when I published the book, I was able to do a couple of interviews around that and found out that there was actually an interest to start what is now referred to as the You and I Know Circle, right? So I'm now leading book clubs around the book. And so in addition to the leadership consulting, in addition to the executive coaching around predominantly finance and accounting firms or finance and accounting professionals, we're now seeing this little bit of a transition to where I'm going to start to do more things around the reading club or the book club and trying to find a way to scale that model to be able to help anybody who is at the point of transition, right? If they're feeling disengaged or they're feeling unhappy about something in their life, I want them to be able to have the resources, tools, and connections to be able to get to that point of clarity or confidence or being sure about their life's next steps.
Yeah, it's always a challenge, and more so in the last 18 months, 2 years, where people's purpose seems to has shifted because they've had no choice really. People have lost their positions or their businesses or lots of other things. So yeah, I think what you are delivering is a much needed service, more so now than ever. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm just reading your bio here, and you went through some troubling times a little while ago, and pulled yourself out of it, and you walk through your clients now. You walk them through 3 phases of personal transformation and 9 processes they can complete So can you just explain about what the 3 phases are and the 9 processes?
Yeah. Thank you. So in July, August of 2018, I left a romantic relationship that I'd been in for 6 years. And at the same time, we sent her daughter to college. And so for the first time in my life, I was pretty much single, but also empty nesting as a result of the stepdaughter being away. And then in December of that year, I started a workshop series and some online courses, thinking that that was going to be a way for me to distract myself a little bit emotionally. But then it just so turned out that those parts of the things I was experimenting with in my business also did not work out. So I got hit with this double whammy of personal things kind of coming to an end, but also business things coming to an end, and got me to that place in May of 2019 where I was like, gosh, do I really want to be on earth at all? Right? You start to contemplate suicide, you start to contemplate different things about your life. And I was really at that tough place. So I went May through kind of August, September of 2019, just taking some time for reflection. And then when the pandemic started, March, April, May of 2020, I realized that that was the time to reflect back on basically 9 years of serving as an executive coach and having thousands of hours in the arena with people to say, what are the phases of transformation and change, and how do we do this? So the way that I structured my book, I know, is in the 3 phases. And the first phase is, how do we end and let go of some old version of ourselves that's no longer needed for this next iteration of who we're going to become. And so in the ending and letting go phase, chapter number one is about how do we process loss, right? Chapter number 2 is how do we overcome fear? And chapter number 3 is how do we navigate emotional release? So I structured it really intentionally to say, okay, here's what we can do to make sure that we end and let go of this old version of ourselves by getting rid of loss, getting rid of fear, and figuring out a way to release those stale emotions. So the second phase is more of an emotional neutral zone where we get to experiment a little bit. And those 3 chapters, chapter 4 is about how do you define your personal brand. So a lot of self-discovery, looking for data within your story, coming up with patterns, writing your personal mission statement, understanding your top core values, knowing what makes you different in the marketplace. And then chapter 5 is a real good look at what are the 5 dimensions of emotional intelligence, and then how do you live them? And then chapter 6 is that, okay, you've designed this new identity. How do you now walk into that new identity, right? And live this purpose and live this mission. So that's the second kind of section, if you will, of the book. And then the third one is very much about new beginnings, right? How do you meaningfully walk into this new version of your life? And so what I wanted people to get from that section of the book is in chapter number 7 is how do you share your brand with the world, right? What are those vehicles and channels by which you're going to share your brand? Chapter number 8 is how do you lead a very engaged team, people who genuinely love working with you or being a part of your business or your organization. And then chapter number 9 is really how do you become a coach to yourself, but also a coach to others, right? And so what I wanted to do in those 3 phases, say, how do you end and let go? How do you get in that neutral zone of experimentation? And how do you move to that place of new beginning? And we all go through this multiple times in our lives. And so I just wanted people to have access to stories and research and processes to be able to make those transitions safely.
Yeah, well, very in-depth book, I think.
It was a lot of fun to write, Rose, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
It was a definitely in the summer of 2020 was a labor of love. And so were there parts of my story that I had to look back on that were a little bit hard emotionally? Yes. But were there other things that I was able to do the research and kind of share some things with people or tell some of my clients' stories that ended up being enormously beneficial right after the book was published? Yes. So that's the thing about this journey is I had to heal a little bit myself, and I had to pick up the courage to be able to tell my story or tell some of these other stories. But once I got to that point, I realized how the book and the processes and the stories within it were really positively impacting others. And that made the hardship a little bit more worth it.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes hard to write a book because, I mean, it can be cathartic on many levels, but it can also be, quite devastating to have to replay those things in your mind and, and try not to let them affect you in some way or other.
Yeah, agreed.
So I guess looking here, I mean, you've got quite a lot of credentials. My goodness, I'm talking to famous person. So, how do you help your clients then to, become the better version of themselves?
Yeah, I'll couch this, Rose, through the lens of effectively chapter 4 in the book, because I think that will help people at a very granular level. Is that chapter 4 is like, how do you discover yourself? If you've never really got to that point of understanding your purpose or your mission or your core values, how do you do that? Or why would you do that? And so what I do is I tell a story of a woman named Avni, who I helped to go through that process for herself. She moved from India to the United States years and years ago, and she went through some pretty tough things in that. So I tell her story, and then we connect it into what I refer to as the 5 tools. And so if a person has never used any of these 5 tools, they would just not be aware of themselves in this way. And the first one is using a personality assessment like DISC, Myers-Briggs, Predictive Index, Emergenetics. I'm certified to use the DISC assessment, so I talk about that through the book. But what that does for a person is it helps them understand their natural inclinations for behavior and communication, which some people know, some people don't. But each of those respective communication styles has an underlying fear. It has a default negotiation style. It has a default response to stress. So I can help people get very clear about how they're going to respond to situations just by knowing their DISC style. So that's number 1. Number 2 is what motivates a person. So I'm also certified to use another assessment that helps them to understand why they do what they do. And this is an unconscious or a subconscious motivator. So DISC is very overt, right? It's very obvious. And these 12 driving forces, these motivators, they're very unconscious. You wouldn't necessarily know them unless they were called out to you. So helping a person understand that, what motivates them, is really important. And the third is this idea of core values, right? And so when we think about our core values, these are oftentimes things kind of like lessons learned, right? These foundational beliefs, if you will, that we live by. So they're kind of like deeply ingrained principles that guide our behavior. So I have access to an assessment where we take 55 core human values and go through a process to whittle them down to our top 6. And it's kind of like our lessons learned, the legacy we want to leave, right? So DISC, motivators, core values, number 3. And the number 4 is a 10-point Q&A that helps people see patterns from their life's experience, right? Good and bad, right? The highs and the lows. But that's really important because once they see the patterns in their highs and their lows, they can start to figure out what to take out of their life and what to insert more into their life. And then the 5th tool is this idea of what's our authority, right? What are our strengths? What are those things that we do different or unique in the marketplace? So what I want people to do is go through a month or 2 of introspection to uncover some unique things about themselves so that there's more clarity about what their life's purpose is. So we take the 5 tools and then we look for patterns across all 5, right? Because I'm a data guy, I'm an introvert naturally. So I love to be able to find data. So looking at the data, right, it's very easy to then see what are the patterns, what are the things that are consistent in this person's life. Now with that, that's where I then help them to write a personal mission statement, their top 5 core values, 2 or 3 year goals, depending on what they're trying to accomplish, and a unique value proposition, what makes them different in the marketplace. So by having those statements, now we have a baseline or a benchmark by which we can go experiment and try new things. So hopefully then, right, if we can engage the 5 senses in learning, we're going to learn experientially, we're going to retain the learning. And over a period of 3, 4, 5 months, we're going to be at a place where we know, yes, this is my life's mission and purpose. Yes, these are my core values, and here's why. Yes, this is what makes me different in the marketplace. So we go from that place of not being clear to hopefully by doing this, what I just described, we're at that point of clarity, hopefully in just 4, 5, 6 months.
Wow. That's really helpful to a lot of business owners or in the general populace, really. It's a lot of people go through life and never know who they are.
That's so true. And I wish that more people, I think maybe that things are shifting in society. Maybe this will become more commonplace. Years and years ago, Rose, I helped a Phoenix-based startup incubator kind of create their curriculum. And one of the things that we baked into that curriculum for anybody who was at the point of entrepreneurship or wanting to start that was some of the things that I just described to get that individual very clear about why they were doing what they were doing. So whether it's to start a new business from scratch or whether it is to be an executive inside of a small, medium, or large size business, this process can get you to the point of being quite clear about what your brand is, but then also helps you to create a much more psychologically safe environment inside of a company or in your relationships. Because as you know, Rose, we're kind of at this really interesting point of transition in society, and relationships and trust and being around people like yourself matters way more immensely than some of the things that existed in society 5 or 6 years ago. So we have to be very good at knowing ourselves and knowing those close to us in order to be successful in business.
Yeah, I think because people have been in lockdown, and then they didn't know what to do with themselves because they didn't know who they were. And so they couldn't make up their mind that, they're going to be Martha or Arthur.
Yeah, they really didn't. And so I'm hopeful that there's other ways and other things that are happening out there that are similar to what I just described, so that people feel clear, right? And that they have a solid path forward. I really want them to find that meaning.
Yeah, I think it's very important that as a business owner, whether it's from startup or you're, already established, that, you get those pathways in aligned to, your goals and your values, because, it can only help your business by having those aligned. And
very much so.
So many people don't have that. And I think it's important. It's an important tool and an important action that they should be taking.
Oh, I agree. When I help organizations through the change management process, whatever direction that the senior leadership team or board of directors sets for the organization, one of the very first things we then do is figure out how to cascade the communication, the purpose, the mission, the vision, the values, the goals from the very top of the organization down to the front line. Because when we cascade the goals down like that and open those lines of communication and help people see how what they're doing contributes to something larger than themselves, they're much more engaged, they're much more productive, they're much more likely to stay with your organization for an extended period of time. So we really want to make sure that we set a strong mission, vision, values, goals, or strategy. But the way that it works best is if it's trickled down through the rest of the organization, so they know exactly why they're doing what they're doing.
Absolutely, yes. I've had several conversations about policies and procedures and standard operating procedures and all sorts of things that are trickled down, but on the same thing, they're climbing up as well, because it's really important that the top man knows what the little man down the bottom's doing. So, and quite often that isn't the case.
No, I think having a feedback loop that goes up and down is wildly important, especially in today's society with so much transparency that comes from social media, transparency in traditional media. So it's just like, we just can't hide the way that we could 20 years ago. So we have to be much more transparent these days.
Absolutely. So your book's called, I Know, A Practical Guide for Awakening to What's Within and Finding Work-Life Integration. Wow, that is a mouthful.
It is, yes.
And so where can people find the book?
Yeah, so this, the book itself is available in print and in ebook and in audiobook. So it's available via 3 different methods or means, depending on the person's preference. And I used Ingram Spark as the self-publishing vehicle. So it's available via probably 40,000 retailers around the world. But more likely than not, people will find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple, or Google, because I think that's where most books are sold. But if somebody wants to learn a little bit more about the book or read the back cover, they can just go to my website. So michaelsseaver.com/books. And they would be able to learn a little bit more there, or get links to a possible place to be able to see reviews or something like that. So my hope is that whether through my website or through one of these other kind of traditional places where you buy books, that you can learn a little bit more about it.
Terrific. And where else can people find you?
So the michaelsseaver.com is probably a great place to be able to kind of see this kind of central hub or repository, if you will, of how do you move from that place of disengagement to that place of clarity. So podcast information, media information, articles, free downloads, online courses, if someone's really interested in doing that. So michaelsseaver.com is probably the best. I would also love if somebody followed me on LinkedIn or we connected somehow on Instagram. I spent a pretty fair amount of time on that, which Rose and I did earlier. So it really is important for me to not only be able to share longer form messages like being with Rose today, but it's also little short snippets by things like LinkedIn or Instagram matter a lot to be able to kind of share that coaching in more direct ways too.
Yeah. And tell me a bit about your podcast.
So the podcast that I have and haven't spent a whole lot of time on it recently, it is called Equal Chance to Be Unequal. And what I mean by that is that, as an executive coach, I have access to celebrities and athletes and politicians and successful people. But I didn't want anybody in the world who isn't necessarily or doesn't have a life path that ends up in that level of success. I wanted them to have access to the same information completely for free. Right. So that's why, it's called Equal Chance to Be Unequal, as I'm giving them effectively the same information, right? That equal chance. But then what I want them to become is unequal or more authentic in whatever way they desire to be. And so giving them the same information, resources, tools, all of that to be able to be the most authentic and happy and joy-filled versions of themselves.
Yeah, and that's really important. And I think that as you alluded to previously, is that the world is coming to that point where the authenticity is more important than ever before, and clarity and transparency and all of those things which weren't evident before the pandemic have certainly come out of the woodwork since.
Oh, they really have. And what I think from in America, NASA refers to this as the precession of the equinoxes. And so every 2,000, about 200 years, Earth's magnetic pole shifts. And so in 2012, 2013 was the beginning of one of those shifts. And so here we are now kind of feeling the effects of that. And we're now in this place where, let's say 10, 15 years ago, humans used to find meaning by associating themselves with a big corporation or a specific religion or a specific sports team or hobby, right? They found meaning by being a part of a tribe. And now in society around the world, we have moved to this place where we find meaning by uncovering our own purpose, right? By understanding our Earth School curriculum is what I call it, right? We came to Earth to do this thing. What are we supposed to hear to learn? How are we growing and developing? How are we contributing to others in their growth and development? So instead of finding meaning from being a part of a tribe, we're now finding meaning from understanding our own life's mission or purpose, if you will, and then living that in a really meaningful way.
Yeah, I think, for all the bad things about the pandemic, I think it came at it was timely. I think what people are learning now, is a good thing, and I think it can only help in the long run. And because I think the human race was headed for failure and doom.
There was definitely, I think we're going to be okay, right? There's some hardships and things that are happening right now worldwide that are tough to watch. And my heart goes out to those folks that are experiencing hardship in the way that they are. But we're also on the precipice of a lot of dark things that have happened on Earth over the last couple thousand years. They're starting to come to light. And as that occurs, as that keeps going, a much more utopian world will be available to us. But it's just navigating a few more months of kind of that tumultuousness to get ready for, prepared for whatever that kind of more utopian, much more friendly world is. So I know it's coming. I can't tell you the date that it's coming, Rose, as much as I would like to, but I know it's coming. I just feel it in my heart. So hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no pain, no gain.
So true.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you. You're just such a delight.
Yes, thank you, Rose. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have you got any last words of wisdom that you want to impart?
We could talk for days, Rose, but I'm going to say there's this phrase that I honestly don't remember where I heard it, but it really does motivate me to kind of help people in the way that I do. And the phrase is, be the person you needed when you were younger. And I think when we think about being a leader inside of a business, or we think about being a parent or a guardian or somehow involved in a family, is that when we're young, oftentimes there's something we would have liked, right? There's a challenge that we had to go through or overcome. And so I think that we find the most meaning, or we become the best bosses, or we become the best family members, become the best friends when we become the thing that we needed when we were a kid, right? So when I was a kid, I was a robot in my family's business. I learned how to be authentic. I now help other people become really authentic in their life. So if somebody else can kind of follow that equation and be the person they needed when they were younger, a lot of fulfillment, a lot of joy, a lot of success comes from it.
Yeah, it's a really great saying too. I quite like that. It's good.
Yeah.
I might put it up on my
Thank
wall.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you so much for joining me, Michael. It's been
My
an
pleasure.
absolute pleasure.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye for now.
Talking with the experts.